Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Agroecology Around Arran, our brand new podcast season exploring farming, food and community on a small Scottish island that I get to call home. Over the next 5 weeks, we'll take an audio journey around Arran, from the ferry port at Brodick to the beaches of Lacranza and the pastures of Shiskine, to discover how farmers and growers work with land, livestock and each other. We begin the series by looking at the theme of meat, a subject which provides the perfect jumping off point for our island adventure. From the early days of crofting and subsistence farming to the present day, animal protein has provided an essential and highly valuable source of nutrients for Arran's population. Meat is something that is deeply embedded in the culinary culture here on the island and enjoyed by locals and visitors alike. In the first episode, we welcome 4 very special guests to the podcast studio. These include sheep farmer Colin Currie, beef farmer Alistair Currie, Zoe Hughes of Wild Elf Venison, and a sustainability consultant and founder of Net Zero Arran, Alistair Currie. The idea of collaboration rather than competition came up again and again, as did the idea of seeking to farm in a way that balances and aligns with the natural ecosystem, making the most out of resources that are available on the island and reducing the reliance on external inputs, factors all that sit at the heart of an agroecological and resilient food system. So, without further ado, let's get started. So we're here now with Alistair Currie, a beef farmer here on the island. How you doing?
I'm good, Wallace. Yeah, yourself?
Very well. It's great to have you. And I'm going to say, do you know how you have people that you don't use their normal name? Alistair's one of them. I'm used to calling him Aki, and it's quite surreal having to say Alistair right now. So if I say Aki, I'm still referring to our guest here on this episode. But Alistair, just for the sake of kicking off this part here, can you tell us a bit about the beef system you run here in Arran and how cattle fit into the wider farm?
Yes, I've got quite a small farm down in the Shiskine Valley. It's about 140 acres, including some rented ground, ranging from nicer soil in the bottom of the valley up to kind of some hill ground into scrub. I produce about 35 acres of silage, and on the better ground, I run a maximum of 30 cows. I've got less than that just now because I try and keep a close herd, breeding my own replacements. And sometimes, like the last couple of years, I've had a lot of bulls, which I shouldn't complain about because you get a bit more money when you're selling the bull calves. But it was harder to get replacements to fill into the herd. So I've got a couple from a farm next, the dairy farmer next door, because I try not to buy it off island if possible. I try to buy everything on the island just for the sake of health wise. I just cut one cut of silage, and the cattle go into the afterwards to graze it off afterwards, because my farm's split by a road, and I've got good ground below the road, and it's amazing how just above the road the land changes so much to a heavy ground. In a wet season, it's not good at all. You get a very short season if it's wet. If a dry summer, the braes I talk about, they really do well in a very dry summer. They don't burn at all. They do very well.
You mentioned earlier on there, Aki, you've got quite good ground in the valleys and maybe some less favoured above the road, I think was what you'd mentioned.
Yes.
I think you said you had some sort of brush
yes.
Spaces there. Have you got areas on the farm set aside that are benefiting nature?
These spaces, yes. There's some spaces that are not grazed or heavily grazed. There's not much on it, so it's good to see wildlife on these parts. There is hen harriers the hill above where I am, and it's nice to see them. Wildlife in general, it's good to see. You've got to farm with that rather than against that.
Is the reason for the sort of closed herd idea and just buying in from Arran, is that a policy you've always had? Is that new? What was the reason for that?
It's a policy I've had for a number of years now. Yes. We used to breed simmentals, which were a good cow, and then with a few pure simmentals, which was good, and then I went to using an Angus bull, Angus simmental cross, and it produced quite a nice calf. I thought I'll just keep the replacements going from the Simmy side and the Angus side. I know it means changing the bull more often, but that way you get a pick of what you put into the herd, and also I try now and have a quieter cow if possible. I'm getting older, and you can't get out the way as quick so I try and breed a quieter cow, and you can, working with them, you can pick as calves which ones to keep and which ones to not. If you're buying in random, you're not really sure what you're buying. And also, disease wise, I like just keep everything on the island. I think we're quite lucky with this stretch of water where we are. There's not as much diseases here as there is.
I think that's what we've spoke about. These parts of this series are filmed not in the same order that everyone's hearing them. We spoke about that the benefit of that isolation a few times, actually. It is beneficial.
Yes.
I guess when we're talking about, we're looking at beef, it's just beef cattle you have, Aki. There's no...
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to have sheep, and I moved away from sheep. It's not a big place, and the land didn't suit the sheep in the winter time. To earn some extra money, I worked off the farm for a number of years in the winter. I managed to get a driving job from a local haulier, and it was good for him. He gave me a job every winter for a number of years. He retired, so I haven't worked off the farm for about a couple of years now. But I'm getting older, and I don't miss the early rising and over the winter and back to feeding when you get back home at night.
You've said that a couple of times, but you're still a young man. Still a young man. When you talk about silage, is that clamp-based silage pit or is it bales?
No, bales.
Yep.
Yeah, bales. The bale suits my system. We used to have a clamp system many years ago in the farm, and then I went to bales. Bales is good, which they're wrapped in the field, and I just... My brother has a contract of bales, and I wrap them, and then you can move them at your own pace. It just suits my system. I try and make haylage. I try and make it a bit drier. I try and wilt it for about 48 hours. And beef cows, they don't need the quality of dairy. So
I must say, we bought in a few bales of haylage this year, and I was very impressed with it. I'd not really worked with haylage much in the past. It's easy to look at beef and lamb, really just the meat sectors of agriculture at the minute, with the blinkers on, as it were, and see pretty good prices. And that has been the case since COVID. We've seen a transition to better prices, which... correct prices, maybe. But it's not that simple. Inputs are still a challenge as well. Is beef production in a better place now than it was X amount of years ago? Yes.
Whether it's to do with the ongoing war just now, but the input, especially fertiliser and fuel, has gone through the roof. Living on the island, it's always more expensive. You're always paying that extra for the ferry charges, your input costs.
Tell us a bit more about that. You and I are used to it, but a lot of the people listening to this aren't. What extra challenges is there being on an island running a beef system?
The last couple of years has been the ferry. I'm afraid to say it's made not just farming, but everything that little bit harder. We're used to thinking ahead. Living on an island, you've got to think ahead. When I need feed, you need to order it. I mean, a month before, and you need to keep it. And you can't just jump on your pickup. Oh, I've run out of that. I can't jump and pick up and run to a local supplier because there's no suppliers on the island as such. So you've really got to. You get used to it. It's a way of life, but sometimes you think, "Oh, I just wish I could have it now and wait for it."
Which is fine, and it's maybe an important note again for it's common discussion between us for sure. But for those that aren't aware of it, that probably sounds easy enough when you're like, okay, X date, October 17th, I'm going to take a trailer away, whatever. That's fine. But we have seen challenges with ferries as well. It's not just a case of that's going to go. That is a thing that's really not consistent at times at the minute.
Yes. We've also had weather issues, which is fair enough, because you check the forecast and you think, oh, you plan to go next week. Oh, I won't. Maybe not get next week looking at the forecast, but there's been a few breakdowns which hasn't helped. They just come out the blue. You think, oh, it's a lovely day. The following Tuesday, I'll make a booking. I know the weather's going to be fine, and you come to go and hear that there's a breakdown for another reason. That's quite annoying. You can't forecast that.
And for an exact case study, I think you said, was it last year, you didn't actually get away the day you were planning any of the weeks you were looking at? Is that
the last 3 years now? I sell my calves round a bit in the middle of March, before the calving starts. I need the room. I used to pick a specific date, but the 20th of March, thereabouts. The last couple of years, I'll phone the auctioneer and say, look, can you book me in for now? And it's taken me sometimes 3 weeks to get the calves off, and I've got to get them moved before my calving starts, just for space wise. So you can't always get the date. No, you can't always get the day of the sale you want. You've just got to broaden it a bit.
I think it's really useful to say that, because for us it's commonplace knowing that. We're born and raised with a moat around us, we're used to it. But it's a thing that doesn't just spring to mind, and living with an island comes with a lot of positives, but it is one that's important to mention. And looking forward, preparing for sustainable farming and the move towards new support schemes, farmers are being encouraged to think more about soil health across the board. Has that changed how you look at soils in the farm and the value they bring to your system?
You do look now at the soil, yes. We've quite a good group set up. Alec Perry runs it. It's the Net Zero group in Arran. Most farmers are involved in it, and this discussion group. And it's good to talk about soil sampling. And we've all done soil sampling in the group, and it's made a benefit. Yes, you realise, gosh, if I just put in a bit more lime, which is cheaper than fertiliser, it does up production. Yeah, so it's been a good group. It's worthwhile, and there's been other topics in it, and it's going on a couple of years now, and there's other topics in it. So that's been good, and it makes you think more. Yes, about your farm and your land and how you do it, and it's good to talk to other people, hear their ideas in the discussion group. So it has helped. Yes.
How important are those groups that you're turning up to, and it's not just, okay, I'm speaking to my consultant one-to-one like you and I are sitting here at the table. There's more of that collaboration. How useful is that?
Well, most of us work on their own, and it's good to meet other people just to hear their views and hear their ideas. We've got a great neighbourly system in Ireland. You can phone and chat to any farmer at any time, but it's nice to meet them face to face. Years ago, there used to be a cattle market on the island, and it was a great meeting place. It used to be held on a Thursday, and that's gone. You don't meet people the same. So these groups are good.
When you're talking about that sort of, not transition, but moving towards focusing on the soil a bit more, was soil an integral part of what you were thinking about the farm 10 years ago, or is it just more now?
You think about it more now. You do think about it more now, and it is worthwhile soil sampling your ground. I think you need to do it now. What ground needs this, and what ground your ground needs this and that. And we're all short on lime, so to speak. So because the problem is with lime, it's getting it onto the island again with the ferry. And
are you putting quite a lot of your own manure on as well?
I apply slurry to the better ground. All the silage ground gets slurry. I haven't ploughed for a couple of years now, but again, ploughing. Do you plough? Do you know? It's another. Or do you direct seed? It's another thing to look at.
Where do you think you're sitting on that one?
I would probably plough the better ground, but the steeper ground I've got, maybe overseed it. Maybe it would be the answer. It'd be easier because it's in a dry summer you can plough and work it, but if it's a broken season, it can maybe be quite difficult to get the ploughing and get the ground work.
And when you look at beef production when you look at that and compare it to mainland systems, I know you've not worked off the island for a massive chunk of your life, but you have done here and there. How do they compare, or are they relatively similar?
I think this stretch of water is a big influence. I think that's the biggest thing, and it is different. I haven't really worked off island farming wise since I was quite young, so I don't know. But there is more benefits of off island. Maybe better markets, especially tourism wise. If you've got a farm shop as such, that you've got more throughput on the island. Winters are quiet. You don't have the same throughput on an island, but it's got its advantages. I brought up a family on the island, and I wouldn't think of anywhere else to bring up my family. It's really, really good.
Are they interested in the farm?
My son is not. My daughter, I'm afraid to say, I think she is showing a bit of interest in the farm. My son he just finished uni, and he's quite happy being away. But I think my daughter will come back, which is nice. I think the island needs young people to work and keep the island going as such.
Well, we had your daughter on the farm for 2 or 3 days this year at lambing time. She was very good. When you look forward, what does beef production on Arran look like in the future, do you think?
Good. That's a good question. Hopefully going forward, the ferry sort themselves out, so it's not such an issue of getting a livestock off and other products on. At the same time, I would hate to have a bridge. Living on an island is unique, and would keep it that way. So I think it's a good way of life. The farming community is an island that's fantastic as neighbours. We all know each other so well. We help each other. We don't always the biggest places, so silage time we'll go to our neighbour and help, and we'll get their return the favour. So we can't complain about that. And the one thing is we don't have any secrets because everyone knows everyone's business, which is it's quite funny. But so that's a benefit. We've got that's a great system. But I say it's got its drawbacks. Weather-wise, the last number of years, I think it's been a bit wetter. It means it's a shorter season for the cattle being out, because most of the cattle on the island now are in-wintered. There's not many places who outwinter them now, and it can be quite a long period inside. I remember when I was younger, you used to get to the end of October before they come in, and now the last couple of years they've been in the end of September. October's now a bonus.
It would be interesting to see, and this will be readily available information, I just haven't checked, what the average rainfall is compared to 20 years ago. I don't know how much different it'll be as a millilitres per year, but I think that the stark change will be the amount at which you get at once, and then the gaps with nothing. Yep. Yes. Which is really hard to manage. You find yourself with a typical trope of you're moaning if it's too wet or if it's too dry, which is understandable at this point.
It makes you wonder. When I was young, everyone made hay. Baling hay was everyone made hay. There was no silage made at all when I was growing up. And you think, how could you manage now to to make hay with the weather we get. You think sometimes you can't manage to make dry silage. You're looking for 2-3 days to cut wilt, and you think, gosh, I can't get 3 days. And you didn't think twice, cut hay, and you just turn and get good hay.
I know we see more of that sort of periods of dry we require to cut silage at this time of year. In Mays and Aprils now, we're seeing that in maybe in early June. But Aki, thank you, or Alistair, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks.
My conversation with Aki, or should I say Alistair, really demonstrated that collaboration over competition is crucial for island farmers. This is a theme we carry into our next interview with Colin Currie, a sheep and beef farmer from Shiskine who also happens to be my dad. And the farm we refer to is what I've called home for so much of my life. In this chat, Colin shares how he manages the land around Bridge Farm to minimise reliance on artificial inputs while enhancing wildlife habitats and balancing factors like soil and animal health. We also aim to reflect on the impact that the loss of the local haulage firm has had on Colin's business, an example of how island farming systems are inherently more vulnerable to shock. We're sitting down here in Bridge Farm, where I call home, with Colin Currie, someone a lot of the people in this podcast series are pretty close to me, but Colin, it feels weird to say Colin because I normally refer to him as Dad. So Dad, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
It's good to have you in your next room.
I didn't have to travel far.
It's all about reducing.
That's good for the environment.
Exactly. Reducing food miles, reducing movement towards the podcast studio as well. But I just have to say, Dad, for you listening, he's called Colin Currie. It feels so surreal to say Colin. So, Dad, can you start telling us about the farm and the type of sheep system that's ran here on Arran, particularly sort of looking at the land you're farming?
It's very much upland hill farm. We run approximately 600 ewes and 180-90 hogs. We're just a small 10-cow beef cows. The area is about 799 hectares, but quite a lot is hill. A lot of seasonal ground as well, with quite a lot. I'm quite sure most of the island is that way. It's low input, and the Bridge Farm itself, Archvane, the hill on Bridge Farm, is a volcano. It's one of the few things in the island that's older than me.
And when we look at the sheep enterprise itself, is it 600 all of the same breed, or what's been run?
No, we've around about 250 blackface and swales, but we're putting them over to Cheviots, so there'll be about 250 Cheviots, a couple of hundred kind of mule, few cleans put to the Texel, and we'll have about 50 pure cleans that we keep pure, and another batch of about 100 that we've tried this year for the first time. It's one of the Logie Durners and Primera. Quite like the look of them. Plan to keep the ewe lambs out of them to go back to the Texel. And the cows run with an Angus bull.
What breed of cattle has been run on the farm?
Well, we've just got 10 cows, but there's kind of 2 or 3 of them are semi-lings, and there's 2 or 3 blue greys, and 2 or 3 kind of Angus crosses, and I think you'll come to 10.
A menagerie?
Yes, and maybe I think I didn't say it, but where our stock go after.
Yep.
The majority of our lambs are sold as, we talk about forward store, they're needing a wee bit time. They're decent enough lambs, but just needing a wee bit time for finishing. They usually go to Ayr or United Auctions at Stirling, kind of half and half. We have a firm that's come for years, a haulage firm, Coopers, who have been tremendous on this island, but unfortunately they are stopping just really with the boat situation, which is a huge loss, but totally can see where they're coming from. The lambs the ones especially in Ayr, quite often go to repeat buyers, which they must be suiting their job.
And your lambing happens basically for April?
Basically April, yes. We're in the first week of May just now, and just a few odds and sods to go.
And when are the lambs sold?
We don't usually start about the middle of August. Usually put them all away over, but probably the end of November. They'll be mostly away. There might be a few.
Selling that forward store product, has there ever been a focus or a desire to look at fattening on the farm?
Years gone by, there used to be a wee bit like turnips growing or kale crops, and you did finish some lambs, but we wouldn't have as many sheep then. You never say never for it, it does, but the saying all that, the forward store, as I say, we're getting quite good money for them, and they will go into places that they can put a good bit more onto them. Swings and roundabouts, really.
So on the farm, here you've got a SPA, which is specially protected area, and then a SSSI, a specific site of scientific interest. I always have to run that off to say it correctly. And I think the SPA is the fact of a hen harrier population, SSSI
Yeah, you're correct.
of the volcano. Does that alter decisions day to day running the farm?
Not hugely now because we're used with it, but there's certain things, obviously, not that you'd be likely to, but you wouldn't grow a barley or that, but you couldn't plough, you couldn't put a machine into it. It's left basically, the sheep graze it with, there's, as you say, the hen harrier, and seems to work away. There'll be quite a few, I'm sure farmers have said the same to you. We've been in quite a few environmental schemes over the years. In fact, we're just might be the best part of 30 years, to be honest, of different ones. They usually run about 5 or 6 years at a time.
On the farm, due to that sort of extensivity, it's produced quite extensively. Your input's quite low. What are the advantages of farming that way? We're seeing a period in time now that maybe at the time of release of this episode that changes, but certainly we're still on the back end of issues with what we're seeing in the Strait of Hormuz, fertilisers flying through the roof, but we also don't want to be putting loads of chemical on the ground. What's that look like here?
Well, yeah, we put some fertiliser on, but it is a small quantity. And feeding, all these fuel, all these things have obviously knock-on effects, and with being on an island, I suppose like all kind of rural areas, it's got drawbacks, but it's also got advantages of being quite a good area.
And you've lived here pretty much all your life, apart from a wee half-year stint.
Other than about 6 months.
One thing that certainly when I bring people onto the farm that I would see you see is there's quite a lot of life about the farm on top of livestock. Is that something you've been quite used to here with birds and insect life?
I think over the years there'll have been a lot of different birds, but there's been a lot of ones, and I'm quite sure I'll not be the first to tell you that. We've nearly all got deer. When I was probably in my teens, maybe even my 20s, you hardly saw a deer other than, as you know, up the String Road. But they're everywhere now. And then there's a lot of other, obviously, birds. It's good to see a lot of them. Like just now, swallows, cuckoo. It seems to suit them, put it that way.
The reason he laughs when he says cuckoo is there's a running joke that if you hear the cuckoo before April 19th, Dad will point blank call you a liar. You could have a video of it, he would still call you out on it, but it is pretty accurate, to be fair. But I think we heard on the 18th this year, but that's a story I won't say too loud because he'll call me a liar. When looking at net zero work across the island, this farm came out as one of the lowest emitting sheep systems. Why do you think that is, and what is it about your system that you think drives that?
The type of farm it is, we do use a bit of cake because I think the type of place requires a bit of assistance, but it's as near as you could get probably to be not organic, but it's very close to that. And I suppose these are factors in the
calculator.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for.
You're very rarely putting a pesticide on the ground. You're using,
no, hardly ever.
I can't remember it, to be honest.
No, a nod to maybe rashes, but I don't know what you but very little.
And then fertiliser, use a bit, but not hammering the
Small
grass.
Small quantities as well. Well, if you can do but a wee bit on it.
Very rarely ploughing. A lot of that's sort of keeping it in,
yeah.
Keeping that carbon quite low. Yeah, your point about the cake, protein, nuts, whatever we want to say, sheep feed concentrates that's going in was, when we looked at that, sort of the score on Agricology was probably the only one that made it worse, really.
Yeah, that'll be.
The rest work quite hand in hand. And if you look at the system, and that's not just here at this farm, that's pretty much all the farms we've been speaking about across this series. Yeah, it's nothing's hammered. There's very little monoculture. It's all sort of working towards that. And I think we'll talk to Alistair Currie at one point about the whole island from a net zero perspective, and that it's quite a good case study across the board. And if there was people sort of listening to this, I should say Colin once more, if there's people listening to this, Colin, from elsewhere, what lessons are there from this sort of type of system in terms of balancing food production, but also with the nature that we see a lot of on the farm when working with the land rather than against it?
I think the type of farm it is, as we said in a previous question, ticks a lot of boxes for, like, with hedging and tree planting. To be perfectly honest, it was Laura that done the most of it, and definitely is a help to nature, if you want to put it that way.
How does the farm today in 2026 look like when you started working here? So let's even say 1980.
No, you were looking at a book there earlier, and a lot of things are quite similar, but a difference. Because I think on an upland farm, it's not you can't make changes. You can make changes, but there are limitations to what you can change to. I would think going back when I was about 10, but off the dairy herd because it wasn't suitable for it. Needed to be bigger, and there wasn't land. So it's always been a less production type of place it is. I think in that. But suitable for Laura could tell you better than myself, but also there's a lot of different moths.
We catch moths quite often, actually, and see what we have.
There seems to be a lot of variation and variety.
One of our neighbours is, from what I understand, quite a respected moth. I don't know what the word is, but scientist of moths, researcher of moths. There's quite a few farms as part of this series that tick a lot of the boxes, and I think, to be honest, all of the farms we've brought into this tick all of the boxes of agroecology. It's looking at producing on a commercial basis agricultural produce, but it's also playing a part into working with nature, working with the land that's around us, and also a big part of this, and it's became a massive part that Alice and I have been seeing over this week, because there's probably no one that's came on this podcast that doesn't know everyone else. There's maybe 2 or 3. There's a real community. I think the farmers, people that are producing, people that are part of that manufacturing stage are part of the community. It all plays into one. But Colin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sheep and beef production have always been central to Arran's farming economy and way of life. However, in recent years, enterprising individuals have also been exploring the potential of venison as a sustainable protein source that can help to combat the growing threat that the wild deer population poses to island farming. This is where our next guest, Zoe Hughes, fits into the picture. We're now here with Zoe Hughes of Wild Elk Venison. Zoe, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
It's such a nice day today.
It's beautiful.
We've had a pretty good week or so. Everything's so much more bliss when it's like this. Zoe, jumping straight on into it, can you explain how Wild Elk Venison came about and what problem you were trying to solve here in Arran?
Yep, absolutely. So Wild Elk Venison is me and my partner. Before we even met, we were both separately planning some kind of venison processing on Arran because there's been a distinct lack of it for a very long time. It's been really hard to get Arran venison on Arran, and we both came at it from different places. So he's got a very long background in deer management and he teaches butchery and all these things, and he's really passionate about venison. So he really just wanted the infrastructure on Arran to keep some of it on Arran. I was actually vegan when we first started talking about this stuff, which made sense when I lived in a city before I lived on Arran. But when I came here, I had this dissonant experience of the food I was buying was all coming from somewhere else, and it was really hard to buy food that was from here. And the venison just seemed like a simple solution to that. And I tried to get hold of venison, and it was really hard. I just couldn't. But there's deer everywhere, you can hear them during the rut everywhere you go on Arran. So I kind of set about trying to learn as much as I could about venison. And in that process, Chris and I decided we would try and make those two things work together. So Wild Elk Venison is really our project of trying to make venison more everyday, because venison's often seen as a luxury, kind of like something that is a seasonal luxury, but we think that it should be for every day because we have so much of it. Arran produces, I think it's about 600 to 700 deer carcasses a year, red deer, so it's huge amounts of meat, and it all goes off the island. So we really just wanted to be able to keep some of it on Arran for Arran.
Yeah, and I assume the plan isn't all of those 600 or 700 to stay on the island. It's just to try and bridge the gap where it's needed. I mean, venison's been a massive part of my whole life. I assume mostly Arran, and it's a healthy product. It's a really good product as well. It's not one of those meats that you have and you're like, oh, it's healthy or it's environmentally friendly, but it ticks the box of health, environmentally friendly, and tasty, which I think is quite a good triangle to hit.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And when I was vegan, I was vegan because I wanted a sustainable diet, right? And then I sort of became aware of what venison is, and it's exactly that it's sustainable. And now I have loads of friends that are vegetarian and vegan and they want to eat our venison because venison is sort of like the footnote of veganism. It's like, yeah, vegan except for local wild venison. For that exact reason, it's sustainable. And it's always been part of life on Arran. I think going back hundreds of years, venison has been an important food source until it was kind of taken away by, landed gentry people. And we still have the tail end of that now, where we haven't been able to access it. So the situation now is that there's most of the venison that we produce goes to a centralised national game dealer that processes it and sends some of it back in packets through our supermarket. So what we want to do is just take a portion of that Arran is going to consume directly and sell it on Arran.
Brilliant. I mean, ties into what you and I and lots of other people want to see, and also for the sake of this episode, ties in massively as well. I have also tried wild ale venison sausages, and they are absolutely delicious. The juniper ones, Zoe, oh my god, wow! I bought 4 or 5 different packs from the farmers market just a couple of weeks ago, and I was like, oh, that'll do us for a few months. They don't exist anymore.
No, yeah, very easy to eat.
Very much so. Very much so. There's lots of wild deer here on the island, Zoe, as you've touched on. From a land management perspective, I guess, why is it so important that those populations are managed properly?
I guess there's lots of different reasons for managing deer. Individual landowners will have different reasons, but nationally, the Scottish government sets targets for the number of deer that we need to cull, and that's primarily for protection of regenerating ecosystems, because the deer like to eat the new parts of trees and plants and shrubs and things, so that prevents them from regenerating when there's really high numbers of deer. So the aim isn't to get rid of deer, the aim is to get the deer numbers to a level that allows the ecosystem to regenerate. So that's why the culling targets are set where they are, and then they sort of distribute that through deer management groups locally, and then each landowner has a proportion of that responsibility to carry out.
Yeah, which just makes sense. If you've got something that's a national or an island or whatever target, if you can somehow separate that in smaller packages, it makes it easier. Everyone understands what's happening, and then you're going to have less people against that movement as well. I guess looking at Arran, which has become quite a bit of a theme of this series, actually, with a historical lens on, there's historically been a lot of culled deer, and they didn't necessarily enter that local food system that we have. How does wild ale venison help turn that into a valuable local product instead?
We basically want to set up localised processing rather than this centralised national processing facility. It's small little processors locally, because our food is primarily dependent on the boat, right? So if we've got deer going to a national processing centre, like once they've been shot and then they go in the larder and then they go to the national game dealer, that's entirely dependent on boats. And even it coming back is dependent on boats. So if we can have these little pockets of local processing, you've got the ability to provide food when the boats are off, which does happen. You know, we have weeks on end with barely anything in the supermarket. We've got venison available then. And that is absolutely key, especially for places like the nursing home or the schools. To have some source of food that doesn't depend on coming over on the boats is really important.
We do see a big movement, and I'm probably part of this, and I think it's very important, of putting high quality foodstuffs into schools, into nursing homes, because it's somewhat been lost with population. The necessity to put energy on those kids' plate had to be hit. That subsequently saw that quality go down. So even if we can start with Arran as a case study and getting good local food, and I don't mean fully seasonal, because it's really not possible, I understand that, but relatively seasonal, understanding seasonality on what's on that plate. It's a really good way for that consumer to understand before they're a consumer as well.
Yeah, I think challenging for you're trying to set menus to build in seasonality to that is really hard. And we find that because venison has a season because of the way it's managed, as opposed to being focused on the deer. The deer don't have a season, but our management from a human perspective has seasons to it. So to try to get chefs to understand that in their menu planning is actually quite challenging. Not all chefs are up for that, especially when you've got a busy summer season where you need the summer season to be kind of regular and busy and all that. So that's a challenge that we've got if we want to try to have more local food in these things.
One of the themes of this whole series, Zoe, is that sort of circular food system angle. Where does venison fit into that on Arran, from the hill through to the plate? We
have on Arran already a very strong link from harvesting deer to taking them down to the larder. Previously, 100% of the deer were going off the island and then being processed elsewhere, and some coming back. And the processor also uses farmed deer from New Zealand, so there's no guarantee of provenance, basically. So all we really do is we link that bit up to local retailers. So we make it circular just by linking that small bit And we've been processing, I think, 20% of the carcasses that Arran produces. And that's about the capacity that we're looking at the moment, at least. So it's really just, 20% of that capacity is going back into the local market. And we found it really popular, and maybe we'd want to increase that a little bit. It just depends on how much Arran is.
I mean, that's still in excess of 100 carcasses, though.
Yeah.
Compared to before you were a thing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Which is, I mean, it's just good to see. We'll talk to Zoe in another episode about foraging. Between yourself and Chris with venison and foraging, I think there's a real story on Arran in itself. And I'm sure there's combination, you've talked about the seaweed there, that you can work together. And if this series of episodes is anything to go by, there's a lot of crossover and collaboration here happening on Arran. It's just getting established into that. And there's a lot of options as to where that could go. Maybe we see a forage product in an Arran chocolate. Maybe we see a milkshake, for example. I'm just throwing out ideas. None of these things might happen. But I think a really big part of this whole series is looking at agroecology on Arran, is that community and collaboration piece. And I think venison, and just to mention foraging, because I know we're going to speak to you about it at some point, are such an important two cogs in that wheel, as it were.
And the links thing is really important. Like, we've got Mara, who are amazing with lots of wild seafood stuff, sometimes have seaweed from me. And then we've got George Grassi, the baker, who's also great with wild food. So I've got these little links elsewhere, and those people have been this really supportive community for the venison and showcasing it and talking to everyone about it and trying to use it in their menus. And there's this lovely kind of subculture on Arran of people refusing to compete with each other and deciding we're all in it together. And if we can all do well, then that's good for everyone.
That's a really nice way to put it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've got little bits that are a bit different. But in general, we've got this lovely sort of, I help you and you help me. I like what you're doing kind of thing. Like, it's not a very commercialised atmosphere on Arran. It's only when we try and interact with businesses on the mainland that it's a bit of a shock. And it's like, oh, right, hang on. Oh, yeah, we have to kind of keep our cards close to our chest here. We're not necessarily friends.
You've got to make money.
You've got to make money, yeah.
For people listening maybe elsewhere in the UK, a lot of the listeners for the Agricology podcast will be based in England, Wales as well. What lessons are there from the way Arran's using wild venison as part of its local food economy that they could take on board?
I think people love venison. Some people are never going to like it, but I think there is a growing support for venison as a source of food that didn't exist 10 years ago. People that are interested in sustainable food are now looking at venison. So I think that the lesson is actually we can all step up to try to meet that demand in a new way. And we can actually use that to challenge our own deer management welfare standards to be in line with what that market want, because they want really high welfare, they want really high sustainability. They don't necessarily want farmed, they don't want imported meat, they want to know it's local. And often that community exists very distantly from the community that are doing the deer management. They don't necessarily meet. Even in a small place like Arran, they don't necessarily know each other. Because I'll often meet people who want, rabbit's a good example, that people who want sustainable local food view rabbit, because it's also managed to protect environments. They view that as a sustainable source of food, but they don't know the people that are shooting the rabbits. And I sort of sit in between those two communities and try and link them up. We started the Arran Game Network to do exactly that, because there are people that are shooting loads of rabbit and don't know what to do with it. And there are people that really want some rabbit for their freezer and they don't know how to get it. So it's just linking those things up in a way that means we're not wasting food. And ultimately, we're honouring those animals whose lives we're taking for our own sustenance and to protect the landscape.
Which is a part that has to be considered. Sometimes it's easy to look at food and I love X product, I love whatever, and forget the story behind it. And I think it's very important that that's part of that story. And bridging that gap that you're talking about is so valuable, because you're right. I know a lot of the people who are shooting whatever, it doesn't matter, anything really on the island. And I know a lot of people who are looking for them. And I know that's not there. So it's good that that's becoming a thing. And also one of the big things, and a really positive note to end on, I guess, Zoe, is when we are trying to access local food, we are maybe in the lucky people that are able to. But when I say we, I mean in general the consumer. We often think that's going to come at a cost. And you've just said in this episode that that's not going to be the case. It's going to come at a cost. It's not free. What I mean is comparatively, it's not coming at a cost, which is brilliant. So it's a great addition to the island.
Definitely. Well, I mean, we're a new idealistic business. And one of the things we wanted was to have some things that you can see venison as a sort of everyday venison product. But we do have to survive, so we have to have some higher end products to make it work. But I think we would feel like we're being useless if everything we're making is not affordable to people. Because you see prices are going up so much for so many things, and that will inevitably affect us. But to just have some things that is actually, this is from the hill and you can just have it for dinner tonight, is a really important, really valuable thing to do that just sort of makes my heart feel good. Doesn't really matter if it doesn't make money. Makes my heart feel good.
Which is very important. And for those listening, Zoe's sitting here with her fists clenched in belief at this and passion, which is great to see. But Zoe, thank you very much for chatting.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, I absolutely loved that interview with Zoe. Wild Elk Venison is a company that really embodies the idea of a locally grounded, sustainable and circular meat system. By building pathways for venison processing and creating route to market, they turn a commodity that would otherwise go to waste into a food product that provides an affordable and nutritious source of protein. Sustainability in livestock farming is a theme we've returned to throughout this episode. While sustainability sits at the heart of agroecological farming, it can be difficult to define and even harder to measure because so many interconnected factors shape a farm's overall environmental impact. That complexity can make it challenging for farmers who want to reduce their ecological footprint but aren't always sure where to begin. Our next guest recognised that meaningful change would require farmers working together to better understand, measure and ultimately reduce their carbon emissions. We're now joined by farming consultant and Arran agricultural expert Alistair Currie to tell us more. Alec, we've been looking at Arran as a food system, and you're one of the best versed to comment on that in general. And first off, I want to focus on your involvement. Can you explain first off what Net Zero Arran actually is and how the project first came about?
Yeah, sure thing. So Net Zero Arran began in, I think it was 2019, which does seem like a long time ago now. But off the back of Scottish Government's beef efficiency scheme in the mid-2010s, the farmers on the island just felt that they wanted to explore carbon auditing a bit more and to get a bit more out of the data that they were supplying to that scheme. When the group originally launched, there were 12 members and we met at the community centre at Lumlash. And we didn't really know where the group was going to go, but the idea was that we were going to collectively quantify the carbon footprint of the island and to take collective action to make reductions in emissions and build resilience into the system.
When that's began, first off, that's 7 years ago. COVID years don't count. We've not aged during that period of time, but it's been brilliant to sort of watch the group flourish because you started with 12 members. How many people are involved now?
Oh, there'll be upwards of 50 people that I'm in regular contact with now.
Fantastic. And the whole basis of this, or a large chunk of the basis of this, is looking at carbon audits. What have you learned? You've worked in this space as a consultant. You've just finished in recent days, from what I understand, an MSc as well, which we'll maybe get onto as we continue. But what have you learned about the overall picture from an emissions perspective, focusing on Arran?
Carbon is really complicated, and you can make any data set say whatever you want it to. But as things currently stand, the group is actually part of the Scottish Government's Farm Advisory Service now. So it's part of the FAS Connect initiative. And in the last year, we have been able to benchmark the group again, taking those individual carbon footprints and bringing them together into one collective data set. So we know that currently the agricultural carbon footprint of the island is about 28.5 kilograms of carbon for every kilogram of output produced, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty good. There's obviously a wide range of differences there depending on the systems that you're operating in. Arable units and dairy units tend to have much smaller carbon footprints. Beef and sheep tend to have slightly larger carbon footprints. However, it's not quite as simple as saying one is better than the other. You know, everything's got its trade-offs and it's about navigating that with the group members to help them understand what's going on. But I think we're looking at total agricultural emissions somewhere around about 11,500 kilograms of CO2 equivalent on the island. And that has come down year on year as the group's progressed.
It's quite easy to think about a carbon audit, carbon calculator and what's being calculated there and think of ploughing, think of grain output, think of methane production, for example. What is being focused on? Arran has one dairy farm, which we're going to cover in this series, but we've also got beef, sheep farms, we've got venison on the hill, which I know you won't be focusing on, but what's being looked at?
So fundamentally, when we complete a carbon footprint for a business, there are 3, sometimes 4 categories that are predominantly important. So there's land and crops, which, as you said, it's things like fertilizer inputs, silage production, ages of your grassland, whether or not clover is present in your grassland. Application of lime is really important. Then we have livestock, the livestock category itself. So we're looking at the average number of livestock held by a business over a 12-month period, the weights associated with them. We're also looking at purchases, sales, deaths, and the weights of those corresponding animals. We're looking at purchased feed. We're looking at purchased bedding. We're looking at growth rates and KPIs, because one of the things that I think is really powerful with the carbon footprinting is that, yes, you're getting the emissions data and you're getting the carbon footprinting data, but you're also able to benchmark your performance against other businesses within Scotland. And the third category is energy and waste, which is as straightforward as it sounds. There's electricity, there's fuel, there's water, there's external travel, there's waste plastic, there's renewables, anything that could conceivably fit into that category. And then the fourth category is a kind of optional one. You can opt into triggering it, and that's soil carbon. Now, because the science around soil carbon is so complicated, we give users of our carbon calculator the option to opt in and opt out of it. But essentially, we're looking at things like cover cropping and grazing regimes, and whether or not you're doing a lot of cultivations, or the baseline soil types that you've got. So it's really complicated. And there is an awful lot of data that goes into it. It's really comprehensive in what we're capturing, and it does paint a really great picture for the island.
And I assume that comprehension, as you understand those complexities, be they soil or be they otherwise, will increase over time as well. I mean, carbon's been a thing forever, but strict auditing is relatively recent in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can only speak for Agricalc. Agricalc is our preferred carbon calculator, but if it's been included in Agricalc, it's because there's enough scientific consensus around it that we're comfortable including it in the tool. There is an element of evolution over time. Soil carbon sequestration module, if you like, was not initially included in the carbon calculator, and we've only been able to build that in because we're now confident in the kind of science behind that and what we should and shouldn't be including.
I mentioned at the start there, Alec, it's been hopefully a happy week for you. You've got the last part of your MSc in. What was your MSc? It had a bit of a focus on the island. If you could tell us what it was, and also what you discovered after serving what I understand to be quite a lot of fields on and off the island.
So the dissertation was fundamentally an investigation into the ability of farmers to classify their habitats correctly. So what I ended up doing was I went out and walked farms and identified the dominant habitat type, which is something that farmers are required to do before 2028 to be compliant with the whole farm plan. I did 989 habitat classifications and asked each participant farmer to also do the same with the same habitat key. And what we found was that there were only 29 instances of disagreement between myself and the farmers, which means there's roughly 97.1% agreement, which is a fantastic story. Scottish Government will be really pleased with it. The farmers overwhelmingly were really pleased with it. There is a little bit of uncertainty and disagreement with some of the habitats, particularly some of the semi-natural habitats where there's a little bit of ambiguity around, how do you differentiate between a wet marshy grassland and a wetland versus rush pasture? Or where is the delineation between improved grassland and semi-improved grassland and then onto unimproved grassland? So where there's a bit of a spectrum, there's a little bit of room for disagreement, but overwhelmingly it was really positive.
What does that mean for that greater Scottish environment?
So during the literature review, I kind of acknowledged that Arran has often been called Scotland in miniature. And so that was my kind of justification for why I restrict it to Arran. I also wanted to have a kind of manageable scope. And if everybody's restricted to an island and is operating in the same kind of environment, then you would hope that they've got the same kind of observations that are going to end up being made in the surveying. One of the other things that came out of the literature review, Wallace, was that farmers generally feel that they're best placed to make decisions about the land that they're managing. To the extent that Scottish Government want to encourage nature-friendly farming, it should be a grass-level kind of movement in that regard. For me, the 97.1% agreement is really powerful in that it suggests that farmers do fundamentally understand the habitats that they're being asked to manage. And if they can understand the habitats that they're being asked to manage, then I would be optimistic that they're also capable of gauging the quality of those habitats and thereby, taking on board the actions that are required to promote more nature-friendly farming and to raise the level of the quality of the habitats that they're managing.
That increases the efficiency of the whole process, doesn't it? If everyone is capable of doing that, 97%, that makes that process much easier for you as well, I assume.
Absolutely. So there's a huge scaling element to this as well, because the overarching aim of Scottish Government, I think, is that by 2028, we end up with a national inventory of habitats. So it's really important from a funding perspective and from a nature conservation perspective that these habitats are being recorded accurately. What this does is it shows Scottish Government, it shows Nature Scot and other bodies that are operating at that level that farmers are broadly capable of understanding these habitats. And it means that, if you need to bring in a specialist consultant to look at your 2.9% of habitats that you're a little bit unsure with, then that's absolutely fine. I mean, there's only so many consultants in Scotland. It wouldn't be feasible to think that we could achieve this without the participation of farmers.
What makes Arran a sort of unique place for trialling sustainable farming systems?
When I started consulting with Arran in 2019, I had never been to the island before, certainly not within my working life. I was really fortunate to have met a really welcoming, innovative group of farmers who, across the entire spectrum, and you'll know this yourself, there's just something different about Arran. You guys are prepared to try new things, to innovate, to get out there, to communicate with one another. There really is a hunger to kind of work collaboratively on the island, which is really nice to see. There isn't a competitiveness, or at least not a competitiveness that I think is disadvantageous to the island. Maybe it's the same for other island communities, but for better or worse, Arran is the island community that I have, and it's a tremendous place.
Well, as someone from it, it's lovely to hear that. And also, I probably should add in, if you head to Glenkiln Farm on the first Wednesday of every August, you might see some of the competitiveness come out. But we do like to work together, and it's always been what I've known. I'm 29, and for probably 20-ish years of those 29, I have lived on the island, and it is a community, as so many places are. But that's my one. And I'm glad that you've been welcomed in so much. But Alec, thank you so much for your time. It's been great to chat to you again.
Thanks for having me, Wallace. Always a pleasure.
Wow, what a fascinating episode and great way to start our audio journey around Arran's food system. I want to say a massive thank you to our guests for taking the time to share their experiences, and be sure to check out the show notes if you want to learn more about the projects mentioned in the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Next week, we'll be continuing our journey with the theme of dairy. So join me then to discover more about agroecology around Arran.